This is bad. This is really bad.
I just wanted some sauce on those zingers.
So Sony's worst nightmare has come to fruition. The PS5 has been jailbroken, and it's down on a hardware level. They can't patch this out with firmware. It's in the chip itself that's in the PlayStation 5s that are already out in the market. And at best, they could play whack-a-mole and do like software updates that people will instantly circumvent with this jailbreak. And it's now a nightmare for Sony for probably the rest of this generation. Obviously, the new PS5s are going to be updated. They're going to fix this, but there's a lot of PS5s out there already. So what does a jailbreak do? How does it benefit someone who has a jailbroken console? First and foremost, you get to play game backups, which means that depending on how robust this jailbreak is, you could literally put a Blu-ray disc in your PS5 or another console that's been jailbroken, and you could copy the games right to the SSD and play the games right off the internal storage. So you could pirate games. You could pirate games fairly easily. Another one Sony is not going to like is that you could run emulators, especially because they try to repackage their old games and resell them to you. So if you could just emulate them right on the console, you're not going to be buying those old games. And so that's going to be a real big problem. Also, too, mods, Sony can't stand them, and especially cheats. Like in Call of Duty, if people have these jailbroken consoles, or in other games as well, that there's online multiplayer, they could circumvent all the anti-cheat stuff and cheat now with their jailbroken PS5. Now, you could make the argument there that Sony will just ban those accounts, or if you're playing Call of Duty, Activision will ban those accounts. But it's now going to be a more ongoing problem, and their cheating is going to be a bigger issue on the PlayStation 5 platform. So what the hell exactly happened? Well, this comes from Giz China. I'll read it to you, then we'll discuss. A new report says core ROM features for the Sony PS5 is now public. This key is part of a BootROM code that runs first when the console starts. The code checks if the boot file is real before the rest of the system can load. If the key is real and works as said, it could let skilled users read and study the boot path in full. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where it's a real big problem for Sony. The key is burned inside the main chip and cannot be changed by any system update. Sony could update the firmware to their heart's content. The fundamental flaw is burned into the chip. There's nothing they could do to fix this on a software level. The fact makes this case stand out from past bugs that were fixed with new code. With the key in hand, a user may try to read the real boot file and learn how checks are done. This does not break the system on its own, but it gives a clear map of how the early boot stage works. Now, the reason why this key can't be changed is that it lives in read-only memory. You can't rewrite it. You can't do anything to it. That is it. So these PlayStation models obviously do one Sony's going to fix this in the future, but current PlayStation models, guess what? There is not a single thing they could do about it. So Sony is probably losing their minds right now that this exploit and this jailbreak exists. And if you think I'm kidding here, look at this. All PS5 units sold so far still carry the old key. This does not mean every unit can now run fake code. Many other checks still guard the system. Each layer must be passed before any custom firmware can load. And Lord knows people are out there that are going to be dedicated enough to figure that out and do it. Now, keep in mind, both the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 have been jailbroken. So this has kind of been a thing with PlayStation consoles for a while. And Sony already knows how big of a problem this could be for the PlayStation 5, especially with the fact that there are already, and it's going to affect all of them. Sony now has to make a change so future PlayStation 5 sold won't be jailbroken. Sony's already sold over 84 million PlayStation 5s. And the number is probably significantly higher than that too. So Sony has a hell of a problem on their hands because you know that people are going to exploit this. You know that people are definitely going to use it to pirate games. And you know that people are going to figure out a way to use it to cheat in games like Call of Duty and many others. Now, of course, Sony could brick your console. Of course, Sony is going to be playing whack-a-mole with PlayStation 5s that are jailbroken. But now that this exploit is out there, it's going to be a game of cat and mouse, and it could change the landscape of the PS5 forever. And Sony may have to deal with this problem for the rest of this generation and beyond. I always think back to when PSN got hacked with the PlayStation 3, and it was out for almost a month. I believe it was like 24 days. And Sony lost well over $100 million with that. They had to give away a couple free games to bring people's trust back. So Sony has dealt with plenty of issues regarding this before. The original Switch was also jailbroken, but it seems like when it happens to Sony, especially when you think back to that in 2011, it always seems to be a very big deal. So what will happen with this? Are we going to see a major shift where there's going to be a bunch of piracy on the PlayStation 5? Who knows? Sony may become very egregious and tackle anybody instantly that tries to use a jailbroken PS5. But people are very smart and they're going to find ways around that. They'll keep their PlayStation 5 offline. Maybe they just want to play single player games and just pirate those. So I promise you right now, especially with how important the PlayStation brand is to Sony, because it's like one of their really only big cash cows still, they're definitely concerned. They're definitely worried. And it's not like this is going to happen overnight where we're going to see a bunch of games being pirated, but this is a big deal. And over time, it could be a major, major problem for Sony. And the headache may not go away at all, if anytime soon at best. This is Rich of Review Tech USA signing out. Have a good one.